What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Big Six Podcast. Katie Mox and Will Brinson here, and welcome back to our All 32 series, the series where we catch you up with insiders from every team and give you the information you need to know leading up into the season. Today, we are covering the Seattle Seahawks with writer for The Athletic, covering the Seahawks, as well as a host for Seahawks Man-to-Man podcast, Shawn Duger. How are you?
I'm doing good. How you guys doing?
Pretty good. I'm a 49ers fan, I have to tell you. So I feel a little
Oh,
rivalry between us
wow.
already, but I'm excited to dig into it.
Yeah, well, I've just become a master at flying to San Jose of
Okay.
years of just covering that rivalry. So, yeah, I'm excited for that, too. I'm glad you kicked that off. I'll keep that in mind. I'll throw a 49ers cap in here somewhere.
Look, let's start where you got to start when you talk about the Seahawks, and that's with the one, the only Eugene Cyril Smith III, as Ryan Wilson I like to call him. You got to put some respect on this man's name. Mike, can he follow up last year's literally top 10 performance this season? Like, is that a realistic expectation for Geno this season?
That reminds me, I need to ask Geno when he started going by Geno and not Eugene. I need to just put that in my head, because he was Eugene all through high school, and then he was Eugene
really?
in college. Yeah, when I was doing a story on him last year, I was like looking up stuff, and he was like Eugene. The newspapers referred to him as Eugene. Recruiting sites called him Eugene Smith. So maybe it was at West Virginia, but anyway, I think he can replicate some of that, because he was really accurate. Like, even when his numbers started to fall off in the back half of the season, like Geno fantasy owners probably know this all too well. Like, he started throwing picks around like the Germany game in week 10. He threw like 2, I think, in the Panthers game late in the year. Like, it just didn't look as crisp as it did when he was torching the Saints or the Lions or even the Chargers and Cardinals earlier. But if you look, like, he was still throwing the ball on target. I still think he was one of the leaders in the league in on-target throws, or at least the lowest percentage of off-target throws, however you want to look at that. Still led the league in completion percentage. So it's like, it wasn't that he was making horrible decisions or that the ball wasn't where it was supposed to be. And that's important, because if you just get to spraying, well, then people just don't believe in you. You know, I mean, Josh Allen was a good example of that maybe earlier. Like, even now, he's good for like one of the most beautiful throws you've ever seen. And then a few plays later, it's like, Josh, we're wearing blue today, right? Like, you good? Geno didn't really have a lot of those. I mean, Josh is a better player, to be fair, but like, I just think Geno was still he had good process. And sometimes you have to go process over results at the quarterback position. And I think Geno's process was still really sound, even when the numbers didn't fully match it. I think that playoff game against the Niners was a good example. Like, he didn't have a lot of bad throws, even though they just got smoked. But one fumble in the red zone and then changed the whole game against a defense full of just juggernauts. So I think, he's got better weapons this year too. He's got Jackson Smith and Jigba back there as well. They've upgraded the O-line. I think that remains to be seen, but I think they've upgraded it just a tad. It was pretty decent last year, but then fell off a cliff later in the season. And also, Geno's a really big film junkie, so I think self-scouting will be really important for him. It's not that's necessarily the case for every quarterback, but for him, having the chance to go back and review a full season of every scenario, not just watching the tape, but like, all right, here's what happened when it was 3rd and 8. Here's how teams played me in week 3 versus how they played me in week 8. Or just going through all those different things, 2-minute, fourth quarter, end of the half, opening 15-play script. He has a chance to review all that and really self-scout. So I think knowing that how much he just lives in the film room and how he adjusts all that should really make him better as well.
Yeah, I mean, Geno Smith was playing so well that the 12th man booing Russell Wilson, which I never thought that I would see. Now, were you surprised at how well Geno Smith did play? Because by all means, I mean, everybody thought that the Seahawks were going to take a step back, and it seemed like they almost took a step forward. Was it shocking to you to see how well Geno played? And you've already answered how he's going to do this year, but I'm just so curious how the 12th man and how you felt about it when he came in.
Yeah, I was surprised, but not just because I feel like there was disconnect. Everyone was surprised, but I feel like if you're
Geno
outside,
was probably surprised. Like,
well, Geno was one of those guys with like, he's like, if there was a team of like irrational confidence all pros, I think
he didn't write back
up there. Yeah, I think he'd probably be he might be like the backup maybe, because Mahomes throws the ball with his other hand. So like, I really don't think that in terms of confidence, it gets more. He's practicing throwing it behind his back currently, and I'm just like, all right, That's about as
telling the entire
confident.
league. He's like telling the entire league about it. Like, I'm going to throw behind my back this year, and you can't do anything about it.
And they
Yeah,
can't.
so like he's probably the first team All Pro irrational confidence, and then Geno might be second though, based on what I know about these guys. But I was surprised because I had seen him play. Right, it's not like he just showed up in 2022. He was in a battle with Paxton Lynch, I think, in 2019. He had been backing up Russ for a few years. He played in 2021. He made 3 starts for Russ, 4 total appearances. He had been in training camp every year in the past, like previous 3 seasons or something before taking over last year. So I wasn't just going off, oh, Geno Smith came from the Jets, he stinks. I was like, nah, man, I got a bunch of notes in my notebooks going back like 3-4 years in preseason tape to be like, I don't really think this guy's it. And then he just turned it on. Probably after like a few practices in camp this time last year, I was like, oh, wait a minute. He's like significantly better than Drew Lock. And it may not have felt like it at the time, but I was super confident. Like I was telling anybody who was willing to listen, like, nah, man, don't even worry about a competition. Geno's going to be the week 1 starter. Like I would be so confident I'd put money on it if I could. Like it was that clear to me. And what the thing that really surprised me is that Geno was able to push the ball down the field last season without jeopardizing accuracy or ball security. Like, he didn't have a ton of interceptions last year, and he was still letting it fly. He and Tua Tagovailoa were 2 of the better deep ball passers last season, and they were just uncorking it with amazing accuracy last year. So I didn't think Geno had that in him. I think it's not that hard to be like a dink and dunk, type quarterback if you got the right scheme or right receivers. But Geno was like, nah, I'm big game hunting with accuracy. That was legitimately surprising to me and Pete Carroll. Pete will tell you he was surprised by that as well.
I mean, he had to have been like Geno. You saw the graphic there. Geno set the record for most passing yards in Seahawks history, like right after replacing Russ. And then you mentioned Jackson Smith and Jigba. Like now, I mean, do the Seahawks have a claim with DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, and is it JSN? Is that I don't know what his nickname is going to be. JSN. That feels like the easiest way. Do they have the claim to have like the best skill position wide receiver guys group in the league?
I'm going with JSN personally, just because I was trying to type his name during camp like on my phone, and I almost misspelled his last name, and I'm pretty sure you can fill in how I almost goofed that up. I can probably get away with that. I have that privilege, but I just don't want to test it, So I was like, all right, JSN from now on. So I'm going with JSN. I encourage everyone else to do so for the same reason, probably. So
I couldn't
especially
agree
if you're
more.
live tweet anything and you're trying to get it out fast, just go with JSN. I promise you, it's the right call. But yeah, I think in terms of their receiving core, the Bengals still have they've done it. They've proven it. With Tyler Boyd, T. Higgins, and Jamar Chase, they have the best trio. And I think until someone else shows that they have the best trio, they have it. So, but right after that, it's wide open. And I think with JSN, with DK, with Tyler, that easily could be. They're just the raw numbers probably won't jump out, but it could potentially feel like that 2020 Bucks team, which everyone had AB, where it's like AB's numbers weren't crazy, but because he was so talented, and it's like I have to put my third guy on you because we're already guarding Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, not to mention having to deal with Gronk. It's like, Jesus, man, we're screwed. And I think the Seahawks offensively could present similar challenges where it's like, all right, you put your best guy on DK, you bracket Tyler, and then you probably got some rookie 3rd round pick on Jackson, just by pure numbers. So I think they're going to really be able to take advantage of just the matchup, the mismatches that they create by having so many guys who are just good at the receiver spot.
Let's talk about Rashad Penny. His tenure in Seattle is a tough one to pin down. Insanely high draft pick, incredible peaks, a lot of injuries. Are they sufficiently deep at running back given how we expect them to play?
Yeah, I think Ken Walker last year was just outstanding. And I lean a little bit towards the analytics side when it comes to the running back discussion. I'm not full on you can put a I'm admittedly a football nerd, but I'm not full on you can just take an Amazon worker and throw him in there and Bill Belichick offense and he'll run for 200 yards. I'm almost there, but I'm not there. But I do think the guys matters. I bring that up to say I wasn't fully on board when they took Ken with pick 41 or something in 2022. But then I saw him play and I'm like, all right, it may not have been the best use of resources, but at the end of the day, he's going to be he's going to be a plus player. If you talk to a lot of scouts, they'll use that lingo. He's a plus athlete or something like that. Ken's a plus player. And then the first game Rashad broke his leg, Ken had like a 69-yard touchdown run against the Saints. And it was like, oh, yep, they're gonna be fine. They'll be straight. And Ken was not really good at hitting singles last year. Like he and like all the Jets running backs that weren't Breece Hall led the league, I believe, in like percentage of runs that went for nothing or went backwards. You never want to do.
He's like an Adam Dunn style, like Adam Dunn in baseball, like three true outcomes, right? It's going to be like straight at the middle, no yardage, or like a just absolute jailbreak that's like electrifying.
Yeah, and it's hard to live in, which is why they took Zach Charbonnet, who is more like, I'm gonna get these singles, doubles. Maybe someone takes a bad angle and we got a triple or a home run here. So I think their running back room, they have guys who complement each other really well. It's not like two guys who do the same thing, which is fine too. Like I never think you can have too many good players, but their skill sets perfectly like balance one another. Ken's the home run guy who can juke and maybe take a 75-yarder to the crib. And Zach's like, all right, it's 1st and 10. We just need 4 right here. We just need to stay on schedule real quick. It's 3rd and 2. Give us 3. That Zach's going to be able to do that. So yeah, overall, as you guys can tell, I'm pretty high on how their offense is going to look in 2023.
All right, let's take a quick break. When we come back, we will talk a little bit more about that draft class that Seattle put together with 2 first-round picks after smashing last year. Next. Okay, so the 2020, I always get confused. The 2022 draft class, probably the best draft class for John Schneider and Pete Carroll since Russ's draft class in 2012, maybe.
Oh, easily.
Yeah, right. Like 2011, 2012 were both great draft classes. Like that's what launched Legion of Boom and et cetera, et cetera. And then you get 2022 come in and they just killed it. And especially, it helps when you have the multiple first round picks because of the Russ trade. What are the expectations for this particular draft class? Because you mentioned like you talk about Ken Walker and like the how much draft capital you use. Like Charbonnet, they put up some draft capital in too. They went Devin Witherspoon in the first round, and that's like anti Pete and John to go that early on a defensive back or cornerback. But he is like such a perfect Pete Carroll player. Like he is such a dog and like just like relentless. I'm just curious how you think this group of rookies is going to fit into the overall Seahawks setup.
Yeah, I think that what made the 2022 class special is very similar to what made those 2010, 2011, and 2012 classes special. It's like you didn't just hit at the top. You hit deep in the back end. Like Malcolm Smith was like a 7th-round pick. And he was an MVP of the Super Bowl. Sherm was a 5th-round pick in 2011. Cam Chancellor was a 5th-round pick in 2010. KJ Wright, 5th or 4th round in 2011. So like you got really good players in the back end, and that's where you think of this 2022 class. Yeah, Abe Lucas was really good. Ken Walker was electric. Then you got like a Pro Bowl corner in the 5th round again, which is just crazy. So I'd say that to say, I don't think the 2023 class necessarily is built to be that same way. I think the top of this class will probably be really solid. Very similar to, I would say, the 2015 class for the Seahawks, which had Tyler Lockett and Frank Clark in it. I can't name anyone else from the rest of that class, but I can name Tyler and Frank because the top of it was very, very strong. I think with Devin Witherspoon with the 5th pick, Jackson Smith and Jigba at pick 20, even Zach Charbonnet was like pick 52, I believe. Like the top of this class, I could see being very, very strong. The guys just fit really well, and there's a direct path to them playing. In past years, it was just really hard to get on the field in those Legion of Boom like heydays. Even if you were a really good college guy, it's like, dude, Earl Thomas is ahead of you. So get real comfortable on this bench, right? So like that's not the case now. So Devin Witherspoon has a quick track to play, and like you mentioned, he's a perfect fit. He's really, really, really aggressive. He likes to hit. That's one of the first things that jump out when you watch the tape at Illinois. Yeah, he just like, I'll just run through a guy, even on a rundown. So I think that's perfect for what Pete wants, because as well as you can cover, Pete won't play you if you can't tackle, because he knows it ain't long before Sean McVay just dials up a bunch of outside zone runs to your corner side that don't tackle, and then you're screwed, right? So he ain't gonna play you. So I think the top of this class can be really, really, really special. These are some of the more supremely raw talents that I've seen. Tyler Lockett was a really good raw talent as well. Frank was too, and I think these guys give me that same vibe where it's like, oh, Earl Thomas was also just really raw and
Russell
really
Okung?
good. Yeah, I graduated, I think, high school, and Russell Okung was drafted, so I don't have a lot of like fond, like elite left tackle opinions to give you. But yes, he was also a really good raw talent as well. Like that's what you kind of get at the top of the draft. You get polished guys too, but like, man, they got some raw, really just natural talents where it's like you don't even have to imagine plugging them in to the roster just because that's where you drafted them.
Nothing.
Devin would make the team as a 5th round pick. Like
nothing ruins my day quite like finding out like that somebody graduated high school in 2010 or 2011. So thank you for that. That's what I needed. I needed that in my life. Like that's
just naturally what I associate with that year. It's like, oh yeah, that's the year that the Lakers won a championship and I graduated high school. Like I remember that.
Yes.
Mike, looking back on that 2012 draft, Bobby Wagner is back on after a 1-year hiatus with the Rams, which we might as well just pretend that never happened. How much gas does he have left in the tank?
I think a lot. If you watch Bobby's film, like he was really good last year. Actually, I would watch film of like the Seahawks on Mondays or Tuesdays or something like that, and like pull up Rams film, and then probably try to catch a little bit of the Broncos offense if I could, just all out of curiosity. I stopped watching the Broncos offense after like week 6. I was like, I don't need to keep seeing this. Yeah. I'm not into horror.
Yeah, I would rather watch the Bachelorette on Monday nights and watch the Broncos in primetime again.
That was rough. That was really rough. But Bobby, he was really good last year, and I thought the Rams coaching staff did a really good job kind of maximizing what he can do at this stage of his career. Like early in his career, Bobby could do everything. Like, everything you see Fred Warner doing, like running with number 3 receivers up the seam and stuff like he did against the Cowboys in that playoff game. Like Bobby used to be able to do all that at a very high level. Bobby's just turned like 33, I think, in June. That's just, Father Time and Floyd Mayweather, both undefeated, right? Like there's only so much you can do about that. But like what the Rams did was they tried to make sure Bobby was going forward as often as possible. Like in pass coverage, you usually just had the running backs on swing passes, very simple stuff, or he blitzed. Bobby had like a career high 6 sacks last year. So like the plan was very good. I mean, and I trust Pete Carroll and this staff to have a plan for Bobby. A, they just saw the Rams do it, and B, they just know Bobby super well. So on top of his leadership and the intangibles that he brings, just a veteran, a guy who can just help the young guys take care of their bodies, manage their money, deal with the pressures of telling family no, dealing with all the women in your IG DMs, like how to just deal with all this stuff because of being famous and all the distractions that come with being a pro player. Bobby's going to be able to help all these guys with that, then help them on the field, and then perform well on the field just for himself. So being a Bobby back is just like, there's a reason that everyone was just blowing up Pete's phone all offseason, like, hey, we get Bobby yet? We get Bobby yet? We get Bobby yet? And so there's a reason. It's not just because they missed him, just because they like him as a guy. He brings so much to the franchise.
The IG DMs were a big issue when I graduated high school back in 1787. I think I was just, we were prepping for the show. I was sort of, you look at the depth chart, and I was like, this sounds like it's like I was like, oh, I forgot he's there, but it's like I was like, man, Jamal Adams. Like it feels like a completely forgotten man because he gets hurt. The Seahawks are still good. And it's like everybody sleeps on the fact that, even if the defense wasn't great, Jamal Adams, I mean, he's going to be a 10-sack guy. He's 80-1 to win comeback player of the year. Any thoughts on whether that be a worthwhile sprinkle and or how Jamal's going to look in this defense and how he's like, if you've seen anything from him so far?
He hasn't been on the field, but that's funny you mentioned the comeback player of the year. I was just this morning, I read my colleague Tim Graham at The Athletic. He wrote a Damar Hamlin piece and kind of floated the idea of like, hey man, they might cut this guy. And within that, or I guess not they might, they just could, because he's like the 4th safety or something, that spot isn't guaranteed, So he wrote about that. And then I was talking with one of my homies. We were talking about John Mechie of the Texans, who just got cleared to practice as well. He missed all his rookie year. And we were talking about maybe those guys competing for comeback player of the year. And then I just jokingly threw in there. I was like, hey man, don't forget about Jamal. And I got laughed out of the group chat. But it's funny. It's funny you mentioned that. Literally happened that was this morning. So I do think it's easy to forget that Jamal's here. Cause he got hurt like 13 snaps into week 1 last year. And then once Geno stole the show with that, I ain't right back. It was like, all right, we're just moved on as a football watching nation. But when Jamal is on the field and finishes games, he's never been a bad player in Seattle. Like I feel like that statement cannot be refuted. And in Seattle, Jamal's he's a pretty polarizing subject.
Absolutely.
But that part is irrefutable. When he plays and he finishes the game, he is a very good player. Like he defends the run really well. He communicates really well with Quandre Diggs, who is one of his best friends. Like together, they're as good as any safety tandem in the league. for my money. That includes the boys up there in Buffalo as well. So I think that if Jamal comes back healthy from that quadriceps tendon tear, which is a big injury, like it took him a while just to even walk again. If he comes back from that, him, Bobby, Quandre, the new $60 million man, Chinna Nwosu, like they have some pieces. Like they still have a lot to sort out, particularly in the middle. But they have some pieces. Like it won't just. I don't think the defense should be. You guys got the numbers on the screen. It should be a lot better than that this year. If not, it's going to be some people looking at Pete Carroll funny because that'll be like 6 years in a row where the defense stinks. And that's kind of his side of the ball. But they should be much better if they can get all their star players on the field together.
All right, Mike, let's talk about how the Seahawks are going to do this year and look at some futures. Two-part question. One, odds to win division plus 210. Niners, of course, are the heavy favorite here, but there are a lot of people that say don't overthink this and maybe there's better value on Seattle at plus 210. It's hard to argue with the value. Do you think that they can win this division? You look at their win total, it's set at 9. Win total in division 3.5 with that over juiced to minus 130. I mean, you got to think they could sweep the Cardinals, right? And they could probably sweep the Rams. You know, it's not, I think the Niners, we could go 1-1 with y'all. So I like that over in division. Do you think they get more than 9 wins? And would you put any money on them winning the division?
Yeah, as a retired gambler, I've learned the balance. I've learned the balance between finding value and burning money. Right? Like
Yes.
I love me an underdog.
You know, a lot of people haven't learned that yet.
Yeah.
It's tough because it's enticing. You know, boxing is really the great example, especially I mentioned Floyd earlier. It's like, man, Floyd just had no value in any of his fights betting on Floyd unless you were putting your house on him.
Right.
But taking the underdog was just such a bad bet. I remember having that conflict when he fought McGregor.
Dude, I remember we had a bunch of dudes down in Pinehurst when Floyd and Connor fought. We were all like, look, this price is stupid, but we are just unloading on Floyd because he's going to whip Connor. And sure enough, he did.
Yeah, because there's always value in winning money, no matter how much it is. Like, so I say that to say I would probably just take the Niners. I think the Niners, the roster is way too deep. Like we just mentioned some of the players that the Seahawks have like on their defense. Like it would take us an entire show to rattle off all the good players that the 49ers have on their defense.
I have time.
Like,
I actually have all the time.
They really are just so impressive. They have like all pro players at every level of the defense. I'm not really sure how many teams can even say that, from Hufanga to Fred Warner to Bosa. Like that's DB, linebacker, D line, all pro, not just Pro Bowl. Like all pro means you're like one of the 2 or 3 best in the whole league at your spot. Like that's tough to have 3 dudes like that at 3 different levels on one roster. So I would go with the 49ers. And also because I was watching a lot of Panthers film last year after they fired their coach. Sam Darnold was like, he wasn't like good, but he wasn't bad. And when somebody like with the arm talent of Sam Darnold just isn't bad, you get some pretty good numbers and some pretty good production, which is what he had last year in like a run first offense with a really solid defense in the back half of the year. Like he was actually decent. I can only imagine what happens when Kyle Shanahan gets his hands on him. Yeah. So like, I actually don't think it matters if any of us on the stream play quarterberg for the 49ers. We'd probably have a decent completion percentage because of all the weapons that they have. So yeah, if you're a real big risk taker, go ahead, throw something on the Seahawks. But like, if you just want your account to say plus, in early January this year, just go ahead and throw some money on the Niners. However, I do think, to answer the second part, I would probably put the Seahawks at about 9 wins. I think that the ways they won last year were pretty sustainable. They weren't like a team like the Vikings or the Giants who just thrived on one score wins. Like the Seahawks weren't that way. They're not due for some massive regression in that regard. I think the Seahawks are just going to go out there and beat teams. They also didn't get smoked a lot last year in the regular season, at least. Like they were largely competitive in most of their non-49ers games last year. So I think that being competitive like Pete Carroll teams mostly are, and not relying on one-score games, and also returning your quarterback and play caller combination, that usually tends to show you how sustainable your winning is if those 2 people are on your team year to year. I think that, they won 9 games last year in the regular season. They should probably get there, maybe take the over, maybe try to find 8.5 if you can and just hammer that. instead of finding 9. But yes, I'm a retired gambler, so I speak gambler, but I just I can't do it anymore. I've been burned by too many final legs of the parlays get burned. So I had to give it up.
Yes, we understand that. And obviously, everybody always gamble responsibly. Mike Dugar, thank you so much for joining us today and talking Seahawks. You can find his articles on theathletic.com. Stay tuned for more from our All 32 series with daily drops in your podcast feed and on YouTube. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe to this video. If you're listening to audio only, do the same. Mike, good luck this season, and maybe I'll see you at Levi's.
Oh, yeah. Thank you for having me.
Appreciate it, Mike.